at the time in the 1800s, there was an interest among these three powers, the Great Britain, Germany, and the United States, in wanting to establish presence in these islands, the Samoan Islands. And at one time, there was a lot of interest, even at the time when Ulysses as President Grant. Some of his friends wanted to say that we want to establish some kind of a coaling station for shipping because it's right in the middle of the Pacific. And they felt that this particular island where the harbor was very well, that a coaling station would be perfect there for the ships, U.S. ships, commercial ships, as well as military would have an interest. And at one time, he even sent this friend of his, Colonel Steinberger, down to Samoa, and he was able to work all the island chiefs. Of course, at that time, there was no unified Samoan islands. We were still confederacies, still rivalries among the top paramount chiefs. They were killing each other at the time. In fact, Samoa was in a state of civil war when these superpowers came to the islands, and it was a very interesting story that had gunships there, right at the harbor, the Apia, the biggest, the second largest island, and a hurricane comes in. This is in 1899. It destroyed all of the gunships that were there, the Germans, the British, and the Americans. And the Samoans turned around and had to save the sailors from drowning. This is the biggest. And so that kind of took the tension out of these powers, superpowers that wanted to take possessions of the islands. So the Treaty of Berlin came about in trying to settle the islands until finally it was the 1899 treaty. Right here in Washington, D.C., it was called the Tripartite Convention, for which rather than these three powers fighting over the islands, it was conquest by denial, so to speak. So the Americans told the British and the Germans, hey, you guys have added to the two largest islands. We don't care what you guys do. The only thing we're interested in is this harbor. We want to set up this coaling station. So the British and the Germans says, okay, all the islands due west or whatever, the longitude and the parallel, whatever it is, the U.S. will deal with those natives living there, okay? And then the Americans would say, well, if you want to deal with the two largest islands, don't talk to us, talk to the British and the Germans. And that's how, and then the British and the Germans made a deal, true story, and to say, well, the British had an interest in Africa, so the Germans says, well, okay, well, because of that, we'll give up our interest in Africa. We'll set up station here in Western Samoa. So the British left and the Germans were there. From 1900 to 1917, in World War I, Germany lost the war, and it became under as a trustee of New Zealand. This is the two largest islands. In the meantime, the U.S. got what it wanted, which is the harbor. They really didn't care what the natives were doing. They just wanted the coaling station on this island. And so what happened was that the chiefs of my island in 1900 went and wrote out a treaty of what was called what we thought was a treaty of cession, but when it was translated into English, it became a deed of cession, okay? And then the other island, which is in Samoan culture and history, was the most sacred island. This commander, his name was Tilly, was having a hard time convincing this king of Manua, which is the other island, to come under the umbrella of the United States. But he had real hesitancy in becoming part like what Tutuila was. So the king Tui Manua, 4 years later, then had his own little, what we thought was a treaty, again, a deed of cession. All were sent to Washington, D.C. Never heard from them ever since. And we kept waiting and waiting. In the meantime, we had the commanders, naval officers, and we started building this coaling station on the island. It was not until 1929 that Congress finally ratified these two instruments of cession. And they're just simply say all military, civilian, judiciary authority is vested in the president. So Congress punted by just passing its authority under the Constitution to the President of the United States. President then, by executive order, assigned the Secretary of the Navy then to officially oversee the territory, okay? And that's how it was from 1929 all the way up to 1951. That President Truman changed the executive order, decided to give it to civilian authority, and the Secretary of the Interior also then took over the administration of the territory. So I always say we're somewhat like an Indian reservation, except we're a little further from the poor Indians here in the continental U.S. And from 1951, that authority still stands. Secretary of the Interior is like the lead advocate for the territory, just like the American Indians. And that's why all the territories are under the authority of the Secretary of the Interior, because of the territorial clause in the Constitution, giving it, because all territories come under the authority of the Secretary of the Interior. Congress has the ultimate authority.